Good evening. My name is Madeline Day Delpha, and I am the Assistant Director of Programs and Community Engagement at the Rose Art Museum. I am delighted to welcome you to Family Narratives in Face-to-Face, Portraits of Self and Other, which is being held in conjunction with the upcoming exhibition on view September 18th through December 29th at the Rose Art Museum, Brandeis University. Face-to-Face, Portraits of Self and Other is co-curated by Dr. Gannit Ankori and Chad Sirois. Tonight, we are going to have a sneak peek looking at one of the sub-themes of this rich and beautiful exhibition of photographs, which will open on September 18th. You are also invited to the opening celebration on September 25th at 6 p.m. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Gannit Ankori, the Henry and Lois Foster Director and Chief Curator of the Rose Art Museum, and Professor of Fine Arts and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Brandeis University, and Chad Sirois, Associate Director of Communications and Marketing.
Thank you, Maddie, and thank you to everyone joining us tonight. We are delighted to give you this sneak peek, and we hope you will come to the Rose to experience the show in the fall. Face to Face, Portraits of Self and Others highlights a stunning array of photographic portraits drawn almost exclusively from the Rose Art Museum's permanent collection. This exhibition features over a century of work produced by a diverse, multi-generational group of artists from around the globe.
So observing the riveting photographs we assembled, the versatility and virtually limitless possibilities embedded within the genre of portraiture becomes apparent. Installed in cases or mounted on walls, these works invite distinct modes of looking and include photographs of acclaimed cultural figures taken by equally famous photographers. For example, here, renowned fashion photographer Helmut Newton, whose work was a Vogue mainstay, portrays pop artist Andy Warhol in a moment of introverted, meditated repose, or the pioneering surrealist Man Ray, who photographed legendary French actress Catherine Deneuve a year before her breakout dramatic role in Louis Buñuel's film Belle de Jour.
In contrast, the show includes anonymous portrayals of social types, like this image of a young street boy taken by Boston-based photographer Charles Henry Currier, who owned and operated a professional photography studio in downtown Crossing between 1889 and 1909, or this photograph of a Montana rancher from the 1930s. Other photographs present fragmented or distorted self-portraits, some of which suggest psychological insights or racialized and gendered critiques. Additionally, Face to Face highlights remarkable examples of the medium's experimental and ever-evolving nature. Often, an artist's technical approach will actually become a part of the portrait's iconography and enhance its meaning. Gannit, could you give us an example of this?
Well, why don't we use the slide we're looking at? This is Myra Green's work. She created these self-portraits using wet plate collodion, a photographic process that produces single unique images. And this is, I'll try to explain the technique. It's a plate of glass, is coated with collodion, which is a flammable syrupy solution of nitrocellulose and ether and alcohol. And it's sensitized in a silver bath, and while still wet, exposed using a large format camera. The plate is then developed and fixed, but this has to be done quickly within 15 minutes. Now, what's interesting is that wet plate collodion dates back to the 19th century, especially from 1850 to 1880. It replaced daguerreotypes, if you're familiar with that. And it's linked with practices of ethnographical classification or anthropological documentation. So when Green used it, she explained how it changed the whole image and its meaning. And instead of explaining it myself, I'm going to quote her. So this is the quote. when I applied this old process, the imagery described my body tainted with the visual history of American slavery. And it points directly to features of race, the thick lips, wide nose, dark skin. These contemporary studies link the view to a complicated historical past. And she continues, the lessons learned are haunting and frightening in these modern times. So, you know, using a technique that was used by medicine, science, and other people to document racial otherness, specifically slaves, she turns it around and uses it herself. And it's pretty incredible. And like other artists in this exhibition, Green highlights how her individual identity in the present is shaped by the weight of external forces, including legacies of colonialism, slavery, and pseudo-scientific ideas of race. So this is British artist Sam Jury, and she's another example that we have on view, and she uses innovative photographic techniques. I wonder, Chad, if you could tell us about her practice.
Certainly. Jury created this perplexing, bewildering visage by projecting multiple images of various faces onto a white mannequin head, creating a three-dimensional composite portrait. She then photographed the composite and modified the image using computer software. The result is strikingly haunting and ethereal. For Jury, this work is a meditation on realism in the digital age. The artist states, quote, "The choice of digital media for the production of this work became intrinsically bound to society's relationship with mass media and the veracity of what we see presented to us in a photographic medium," end quote. With this work, Jury essentially calls into question the legacy of authenticity closely tied to photography's history.
Right. And also, she challenges the idea that a portrait is a distinct representation of an individual. And this is not an individual. This is a composite of, you know, 1,000 pities. Another curatorial consideration in this exhibition relates to our decision to draw attention to the format of the photographs. And Chad and I used individual portraits, like this elegant self-portrait by Barclay L. Hendricks, paired figures like this image by Sage Sawyer, and Chad will discuss this later on in the program, and triptychs like the monumental triple self-portrait by Lyle Ashton Harris that came into our collection just this year. And here he presents himself shrouded in red, black, and green of the Pan-African flag and creates this very powerful triptych. But in tonight's conversation, we will focus on select photographs that highlight family portraits, as Maddie explained. We will discuss a range of traditional as well as unconventional representations of kinship that document the personal while shedding light on the social and political contexts that shape our notions of what constitutes a family unit.
So we'll start off with one of the earliest photographs in Face to Face, this silver gelatin print from 1905 titled Ellis Island by Lewis W. Hine. Born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, Hine was an influential American reformist, photographer, and sociologist. In 1901, he moved to New York City to teach at the Ethical Culture School, which is still in existence today, where he integrated photography into his teaching practice. Hine believed that the camera's power lay in its ability to produce evidentiary documents that could be employed to advocate for social reform. While at the school, he initiated several significant series, including his powerful portraits of immigrants at Ellis Island. Situated in New York Harbor, Ellis Island served as a medical facility that processed thousands of Southern and Eastern European immigrants seeking refuge in the United States during the early 1900s. While many recognize Hine as a documentarian, he did imbue his photographs with artistic pathos to help elicit empathy and concern for his subjects. With Ellis Island, he depicts an anonymous immigrant mother with her two children. The image's composition, though, does draw from art history. You see a serene mother who holds her jubilant infant in a manner that evokes a tableau of the Madonna and Child. At the same time, the eldest child almost serves as a stand-in for John the Baptist as she gazes adoringly upon her sibling. Light pours through a large window over the three figures, ensconcing them in a halo-like effect that almost also sort of looks like stained glass. Hine's images served as a potent tool for social reformers to relieve fears over immigration and to help improve the lives of the newly arrived families in America. A preeminent pioneer of American photography, Hine's work would have a lasting impact on generations of photographers, particularly those who sought to use the medium to advocate for the marginalized. I think you'll show us another example of one of Hine's contemporaries whose work expanded these perceptions on who and what is considered American.
Yeah, so in this context, I also feel compelled to note that the need to affirm one's patriotism as an immigrant or as a native is often the result of other people challenging your identity and questioning your loyalty. You know, that's why Hines and Laura Gilpin, whose work I will discuss next, feel the need to use photography to kind of justify or show immigrants or Native Americans in this positive light. So through the course of the 19th century, white photographers often framed portraits of Native Americans, but in stereotypical ways that really exoticized and othered Native cultures. Photographer Laura Gilpin took a different approach. After studying with Clarence White in New York in 1918, she returned to her native Colorado and became one of the foremost photographers of the Southwest. Initially, she captured soft focus pictorial images, you know, what she learned from Charles White, from Clarence White, sorry. You know, landscapes, portraits of Native Americans. But by 1950, the year she took this photograph, Gilpin adopted an empathetic documentary style of photography. At this point, she had been working with the Nakai family for the better part of 2 decades, so deep engagement and involvement in getting to know them. In this family portrait, Francis Nakai stands next to his seated wife with their grandchildren at their side. A very large American flag hangs on the wall behind them, dominating the background. In fact, this flag had been given to the couple by the United States government after their son was killed in service during World War II. This photograph, taken 5 years after the war ended, is a testament to the Nakai family's dignity, stoicism, and patriotism. But we think it is also an indictment of the nation for failing to live up to its ideals on behalf of its Navajo citizens, even as many of them made the ultimate sacrifice during wartime. I want to stop here for a moment to note that Chad and I deliberately juxtaposed the immigrant family from Ellis Island with this photograph of the Navajo family from the Southwest. We did it so in this program, but also in the exhibition. We wanted to raise questions pertaining to belonging in America. That these questions continue well beyond the time when these photographs were taken in the first half of the 20th century. Another group of photographs we want to share with you tonight display alternative and less conventional family portraits. Chad?
Yes, so now we get the chance to return to the Sage Sawyer we saw earlier in the program. So in the 1980s, Sawyer set out to chronicle the experience of long-term same-sex couples. She was spurred in part by the AIDS crisis that was ravaging gay communities across the United States, but also by her desire to better understand her closeted father. Sawyer was inspired to capture images of gay couples who did not conform to the stereotypes of promiscuity that were proliferating throughout the media at the time. And so she really wanted to challenge those ideas and preconceptions. By documenting and interviewing gay and lesbian couples of all ages and backgrounds, Sawyer highlighted the variety and strength of relationships that often went unacknowledged and unseen. This project would be published in her book, At Home with Themselves. In this photograph, shot in black and white, with a flash and depth of field that renders everything tack sharp, Sawyer reveals a loving tenderness between two men, Andrew and Patrick, a gay couple who I'm assuming might be vacationing, but they could live there on New York's Fire Island, which was historically an alcove of safety for gay and lesbians throughout America, but particularly in New York.
And this is such an interesting project. The Rose owns another photograph by Sawyer, which we couldn't include in Face to Face. I would say there's so many photographs that we, like hundreds of photographs that we couldn't include. But we did want to share it with you. And Chad, can you tell us about this photograph?
I'd be happy to. As Gannit said, we didn't include it, but I thought it was really important to share this photo tonight as we were talking about family portraits of all kinds and all types of families. So in this photograph, also from Sawyer's At Home with Themselves series, titled Gordon and Jim, with Gordon's mother, Margaret, San Diego, California, February 1987, Sawyer captures the couple, Gordon and Jim, together with Jim's elderly mother. In the photograph, Gordon's embracing his mother with an arm outstretched to his partner of 21 years. They're together, but separate. The portrait captures a sense of intimacy and yet a keeping apart between the three, a physical expression of how they live together. In an interview with Sawyer, Jim revealed that despite the couple's deep integration into Gordon's parents' lives, even living in a house behind them, Gordon's parents never discussed their son's sexuality, and the topic of homosexuality was forbidden. Jim stated, quote, "If the subject was mentioned or there was a documentary on the subject on television, he," meaning Gordon's father, "would turn the channel and not let Gordon's mother watch it," end quote. This pseudo don't ask, don't tell policy changed shortly before this photograph was taken. Gordon tells Sawyer, quote, "Even though my mother certainly had been aware of the fact that I was different, we had just never really talked about it. And 2 weeks ago, we sat down and we talked about it, and it was just fine." Jim then adds, "Isn't she a beautiful person? I've loved her from the beginning." Sawyer's image is a prime example of how love can be a catalyst to integrate traditional notions of family with non-heteronormative concepts of belonging and connection.
So wonderful. So this one kind of bridges the gap of mother and child and the alternative family unit of two men. So powerful. I want to pivot here away from the documentary approach to family photographs that we have seen so far. We also saw the very first one by Hein that is very much stage, as Chad explained, like a painting, rather than this kind of documentary photography. But moving away from that, a divergence from this genre of documentary photographs may be found in Lorraine O'Grady's body of work titled Miscegenated Family Album. So in this diptych, that is part of this family album, I mean, it's in the title, a photograph of the artist's sister, Devonia, on the left is paired with an image of an ancient sculpture depicting the Egyptian queen Nefertiti. O'Grady began working on the series in 1980, shortly after her sister died at the early age of 37. O'Grady described how during a trip to Egypt, she felt that depictions of Egyptian queens resembled her sister. It was almost like finding a long lost family. As an artist of Western, African, Jamaican, and Irish descent, living in the US, her otherness and kind of being set apart and not looking like everyone else triggered questions about belonging, family, and her hybrid identity, hence the title, Miscegenated Family Album.
There's so much of a complex meaning behind this diptych. And just knowing that it's actually a tribute to her sister, it's such a beautiful way to memorialize her and to connect her to such a noble and powerful lineage. I think in the next photograph, we'll also see this version of sort of reclamation and familial tenderness.
Yeah, that's really exactly a wonderful connection between these two. Here we see Nona Foston. It's also part of a series called Mitochondria. And those of you who remember your science classes might remember that that relates to the female genealogy, very, very scientific. So the Mitochondria series includes this photograph, Warrior and Child, and it is devoted to the women who form the artist's family unit. In this carefully staged image, again, I say we move away from documentary or pseudo-documentary images, it's staged, but the artist poses carrying her daughter with strength and resilience. Foston presents herself as a nurturing maternal figure, but also as a powerful warrior. The strips of cloth and gauze wrapped around her fist and lashed across her otherwise bare chest can be read as bandaged wounds from earlier battles of this warrior, or as armor worn in anticipation of future challenges and struggles. While reconfiguring the ubiquitous mother and child motif and kind of secularizing it in a way, Foston also sees her work as a love letter to Black mothers. She has said, and again, we like to amplify the artist's own voices, so I'll quote, "I knew the power of the Black body, and specifically of my fleshy, large body. My work was about acknowledging the pain, but also the beauty of a Black woman's body." So this photograph also has the mother and child motif, like the Hines that Chad discussed in detail. But here she completely reconfigures it. What a Madonna that's bare, a Madonna that's not slim. You know, she completely challenges everything that we can think of. Now, Foston's raised fist alludes to the Black Power movement, to the theme of resistance writ large that permeates her oeuvre. And she just had a wonderful solo exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum titled White Shoes. I hope you got to see it. But it also relates to the Statue of Liberty, a motif that appears in her art over and over again, and perhaps links to the immigrants of Ellis Island. Foston's genealogy leads back to the trafficking of enslaved women forced to cross the Atlantic and settle in America. So natives, people who came by choice, people who were forced out of Europe, people who needed to come here or were forced to come here. The raised fists also dominate Shada Soleimani's two photographic portraits titled Dissident and Agitator. Although we do not see their faces, they are indeed family portraits, portraits of her mother and father. Soleimani's parents were political activists who were persecuted, jailed, tortured. Her mother was raped, and then forced to flee Iran in the 1980s. And Shada Soleimani was born in this country. Only very recently, the artist began to explore her parents' personal histories in an artistic project titled Ghostwriter. This close collaboration between daughter and parents was conditioned on maintaining their anonymity, and that's why she photographs them from the back and hides their faces. Their identities, however, are highlighted through the inclusion of various objects and gestures that allude to their life in Iran prior to immigrating to the United States. This is a very interesting photograph. Again, not the documentary photograph, not the usual one. Her practice includes the construction of a composite dioramic installation in her studio, which she then photographs in ways that maintain their fragmented collage-like characteristics. So again, we see an unusual portrait that hides a face. And like a lot of the portraits, you actually focus on the face, but we show the versatility of portraiture and specifically photographic portraiture.
Thank you for walking us through those final images, Gannit. We'd like to end tonight's program with a few quotes by Mexican artist Manuel Alvarez Bravo, whose work is included in Face to Face. He said, quote, "A photographer's main instrument is his eyes," end quote. When you visit the exhibition, we invite you to open your eyes as you observe and look deeply into the faces on view. The works exhibited attest to the richness of portraiture and photography's stunning possibilities. Alvarez Bravo also said, quote, "There is no other art with as great a democratic capacity as photography." Gannit and I hope that the remarkable range of human existence portrayed and displayed in Face to Face will evoke contemplation, doubts, compassion, empathy, and self-reflection.
Well, thank you, Chad, for ending us with this incredible quote, and an artist I really appreciate. Thanks for this conversation. I also appreciate all our earlier dialogues, so many as we conceptualized and curated this show together. Thank you all for joining us on Zoom. Thank you, Maddie and Minen, for facilitating this. And I think we have time for a couple of questions. Maddie, can you help us with this?
Yes, absolutely. To start us off, some of the artists that you mentioned use their own families as subjects, and others developed relationships with their subjects as part of the process. So I was hoping you could talk more about the importance of the relationship between subject and photographer.
Well, maybe I can start us off with something that we didn't get to discuss, and that was the celebrity photographs that we just showed in passing. But both, you know, the great photographer, a Vogue photographer comes and photographs Andy Warhol, the celebrity artist, or Man Ray comes and photographs the big movie star, Catherine Deneuve. They don't really know the personality, the person. They kind of try to find an angle, and you can tell that this lack of, it's not their family, it's not their friend. They maintain that kind of allure and kind of distance, the kind of fandom because of that distance. And so I think that, well, Chad, why don't you jump in and talk about some other elements, and I can then come back and talk about some of the other examples.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because now this is posing another question that's in my head. The difference between a, you know, a portrait, someone taking your photograph or taking someone's photograph versus self-portraiture, which we have many examples in the show of self-portraiture. And is it possible for an artist, you know, there's the concept that photography is objective, right? You know, it's a document, which is a little bit of a fallacy, but can an artist be fully objective when they're taking a self-portrait? How much of that is a construction of what they want to be seen versus, yes, you might ask a model or a family to pose in a certain way or in a certain setting, but they still have sort of agency of essentially how they still want to be, you know, looked. And I think one of the interesting things that photographers can do, no matter what their sort of intent with the photograph, is to make the subject feel very comfortable. The more the subject gets comfortable, whether it's through interviewing, whether it's just through spending time together, it really can relax the subject, which allows the photographer to kind of maybe unlock something, lets the subject bring their guard down, and they can get like at a hidden truth that might otherwise be guarded. And I think it's an interesting concept and something I've experienced. I've been fortunate enough to be a model for photographers locally here in Boston occasionally. And it definitely, there's a difference between someone I don't have any relationship with, and I'm just going into their studio and taking a photo, or someone I have a long-standing friendship with, where I'm more relaxed and more comfortable. So yeah, I think there is definitely a difference between the two. And I think it will change the actual outcome of the image.
Right. So I think Gilpin's photograph from 1950 is very telling, because she photographed Mrs. Nakai as early as 1932. And then she was using the kind of atmospheric, more more romantic, I'll call it, um, painting, like a photography that's based on painted compositions. And it looks like stereotype. Whereas as she transitioned with the New Deal and after the Great Depression, I mean, the history of photography runs like with links through our exhibition. We see her looking more closely, and you can tell that she knows them. She knows about them. She knows about their loss. She knows about their dignity. She crops things in specific ways. And we could go through and maybe we can do a run through, go through every single photograph in the show and explain the choices that the photographers made. We don't have any like snapshots, and even snapshots, I mean, even when we do, photographers frame, they choose what to keep in the frame and keep outside. In the Gilpin photograph, for example, one of the 4 grandchildren is like cropped at the left side. And that shows that their reality extends beyond the picture frame. That's very much unlike the Ellis Island family, where the background, should I show the works that I'm talking about?
Sure, yes. If you can
If I can find
easily,
them,
if you can do it easily.
we have the technology. Um, or no, we don't. Yes, we do. So,
It's a black screen for me.
it is.
Yeah, I don't know if
Well, I think you're describing the arched
Can you
window.
see
Oh,
it
here we
now?
go. Yes, there it is.
Um, so you see that here, there's like a deliberate way of containing, the mother and the two children, and that the model is, he's not photographing what he sees, he's photographing what he wants to show through the prism of art history. Here, what I was talking about was this grandchild that is cropped deliberately so that and the American flag is cropped so that we read this as their issues, their their reality extends beyond this photograph. And, the artists decide what to show and what not to show. The photographer decides how much to reveal. Like, think of Shada Soleimani's portraits. She knows her parents really well, but she chooses to show us one thing, but not another thing. And the self-portraits, every single self-portrait we have, there are choices. How close one lets you get. And yeah, it's really, really interesting.
I'm also really interested in what both of you talked about during the program about, these photographs being used to challenge notions about family and about who is considered other. And I was wondering if you could talk more about photography being used as a device to humanize the sitter, or as being used as a social justice tool in a way.
You want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, Hein is a great example of that. Initially he started using photography. He was a science teacher. And so he started using photography as a way, again, to kind of build sort of evidence for his students. But he started to realize that there was actually a lot more that he could do. He eventually quit being a teacher and became a photographer full time. But his photography was really focused around exposing sort of social ills that were happening. So, the immigrants coming in on Ellis Island was one thing, but then he also worked tirelessly to document child labor across the United States, which helped enact laws for the protection of children. And then, of course, you think of the New Deal photographers, which Hein was actually one of those as well, going around and photographing, migrant families or ranchers. And I believe that's where the rancher comes from. It's by Rothstein, Arthur Rothstein. And we have another image in the collection, which we couldn't include in the show just because we only have so much space, of a migrant family from, I believe it's from Oklahoma. And it's a mother with her, I think 3 or 4 children, outside of like a beaten up Oldsmobile pickup truck. And it allows you to be able to see beyond what you see on a regular basis. I mean, photography had a way of creating a connection between all Americans, not just the Americans you saw next to you. It could bring us all together and show the vast, complex identity of what being an American is. And I think that's part of what's happening in the show. Not all of the artists are American, but it does kind of show the extent and the diversity of humanity. And it's not that painting can't do that, but there is something, again, that there's that notion that this is true when you look at a photograph versus a painting, which can be a pure construction of fantasy. And so I think there's something about that allows people to create empathy that they might not have for someone who's only been vilified, because of political reasons or class or whatever. So I think there's a power there with photography to be able to do that in a way that, painting might not necessarily be able to, because you can still say, oh, well, that's just a painting, but this is an actual photograph of something that's real.
Right.
Real.
And in theories about photography, it's called, photography is indexical. You know that what you see, there is something outside the frame that happened. It also freezes a moment, and you kind of try to keep something alive, but you know that the minute you photographed it, it's no longer there, so it's gone. So there are a lot of paradoxes that come up when you look at the photographs. I wanna actually go back. You know, you pointed to something, and I think the New Deal photography and the examples that Chad brought are great examples of trying to be inclusive. There was a project called The Family of Man, you know, that tried to show that everyone is human. But photography, actually, the roots of photography and early 19th century photography can be connected with colonialism and slavery and very different uses. And again, it was science or pseudoscience, beliefs in physiognomy and different things. So at Harvard, right down the river, we have, or across the river, I don't know, the Charles River, we're in Boston, the Boston area, but you have the photographs of daguerreotypes of slaves, and they were taken. It was like the people who were complicit were the photographers, you know, so art is complicit, the scientists, the scholars, the anthropologists who photograph the scars on the bodies, etc. And that type of photography, today we might look at it and want to rehumanize and give voice, you know, listen to what the subjects of these photographs are telling us. But initially it was to other them. It was, and all over, you know, it was people of different, even Native Americans were photographed as this exotic, noble, but extinct, you know, no, they're not here. Thanksgiving, maybe, but so I think the history of photography is fraught with the technique or the practices that were not used to inclusive, and then it was reversed. And a lot of the works that we have, the Nona Faustin that you saw, the Barclay Hendricks that also, you know, the Barclay Hendricks, he photographs himself as after he was in Europe as a student, he saw that there were no representations of Black people in museums. So he photographs himself based on paintings to kind of show the dignity, show himself as an artist, show himself as a painter, a photographer, a cultured man, an elegant person with a black hat. We have the same with Myra Green and Nona Faustin. They are aware of that history, the oppressive history of not just photography, of image making, of art making, and they try to switch it around. And they do so. We have Moholy Zanel, you know, who does it. We have several artists who are Black and queer and kind of give voice to that. And we place them center stage, and that's why we finished that Chad read us that wonderful quote by Manuel Alvarez Bravo about the potential of photography to find democracy. We have them all on equal footing. It's not like one family unit is more important than another family unit.
Well, that's such a beautiful thought with which to end the program. So I just want to thank everyone again for joining us. Thank you to Gannit and Chad for your lovely insights. And I want to once again encourage you all to come in person to see face-to-face portraits of self and other at the Rose Art Museum, which opens on September 18th.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Patty. Thank you, Chad, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.